Okay. I do want to see, this is almost at the vertical horizon line, but I would really like to see more of the front than of the side. He's not really that exciting from the side. But I'm going to go ahead and start with just a long, that's a snaking vertical line. A long vertical line. I'm going to make this, I don't know, that's probably about 30 or 25 degrees. And I want this one to be a little bit steeper going back this way. And what I want to do is I want to figure out, okay, well, if he had his if his body was intact, I want his legs to be about that wide. And that'll help me proportion this thing out. So just like that other one, this exploded view, I'm going to kind of build up where everything goes first, and then start to draw in everything. And if you look at the proportion of our Lego man, it's almost a square down here, a little bit thinner than a square, and then it's basically a square up to his neck. Ours is not going to have the oxygen pack, so our head will be a little bit lower. The head's pretty large. We're going to draw our arms in the orientation that I showed you a minute ago, this orientation, because we want, I want to draw just some simple horizontal ellipses instead of making it even more difficult. So, square, maybe a little thinner than a square. So I'm going to go ahead and say, you know what, intact. Well, it needs to be a little bit taller. I'm going to be about right there. Then I need some space before I get to the torso. I'm making sure that I've got some convergence. I don't want this converging too quickly. So this is the bottom of his shirt. That's not tall enough. That's the top of his shirt. So think about this proportion. Does that look like a square? Does that look like a square? And then moving on up, so his neck's going to be maybe somewhere about right here if I've got this right, and I had to adjust it last time. Guess what? I'm somewhere near the horizon line here, right? So I need to, let's just say that is the horizon line. So we're going to draw his head above the horizon line. And then coming back this way, these have to converge quicker. So we haven't drawn anything yet, but I basically figured out where everything's going to fit on this piece of paper. Let me think. The relationship. Let me grab him. He's not doing any good right there. By necessity, because this is a Lego, these are basically two squares on the bottom, so it's half this distance going back. So that's the depth of my guy. And I'm going to start with the surface that's like the top of his legs. And so there's a little bit of thickness right here. And then I want to find the center of this. I could do that with the X, or we should be getting good enough to where there's a foreshortened center somewhere about right there. I'm going to cut through this to find the center back here, because I've got to put in what amounts to his crotch, right? So we have to put in his crotch. And that crotch is part of that really long cylinder that we had earlier. And so that cylinder, the minor axis is going to run towards the left vanishing point. And it's about this deep. So when I draw this ellipse in, I'm looking at my minor axis. I'm going to sketch this ellipse. And we'll check the chord in a minute to where it is bisected by that minor axis. I haven't angled it quite enough. And so now let's check the chord. There's my chord coming down vertical. That gives me that. Now, this is right on the center plane, and I actually have the crotch, the connection area here, has some thickness. So I actually need to draw this ellipse. Same ellipse. I mean, it's so close to that one. I need to draw it just a couple more times to each side to give this that thickness. The top of my ellipse is right here. Interestingly enough, on the side, and you may not have noticed this before, the hip cuts into our belt. And it's also part of an ellipse. Now, I'm not worried about drawing the entire ellipse. I just know that I basically need to draw this section of an ellipse out here. And so it accelerates. It's that part of an ellipse. It accelerates as it comes back. I don't need to sketch that entire ellipse. Okay, so from this point, there's a connection. We had it printed somewhere. There's another kind of essentially cylinder that's pretty small. It comes this way, and this is where the hips connect. We're going to keep this fairly simple, and I'm just going to put a sphere, a circle, out here where that connects. It'll go the same way in the other direction, same distance in the other. Well, we see some of it. So here, I'm going to step out there. We'll see maybe just a little bit of that on the opposite side. Notice, I haven't really, again, I'm not using my ellipse templates right now. I'll use them in a minute to clean this up. I feel pretty confident that somewhere in here is my ellipse. And that if I had an ellipse template and I was looking at that chord, I could really nail it. Now I need to let's draw the right leg. So let's step out a certain distance. Let's get outside of this, somewhere about right there. Now, as my ellipse gets further from the vanishing point, that is further along the vanishing line that goes towards the vanishing point that is the minor axis. That was really wordy. It's going to get, what, thinner or fatter? This one should be thinner. So at least that's a place to start, and then we'll check the chord, roughly. That's a little too thin, so I need to be a little bit wider. And then I need to measure or estimate the thickness of my leg, and it's about this thick. So I'm just going to take this distance right here and essentially move it out here. There's the center of the furthest ellipse. This one's probably going to be the ellipse that I drew just a moment ago. So let's check that chord. Yeah, that feels better. So the back of the leg just comes straight down off of the tangent. I think I had this set up, that point right there, set up as the back of my legs. I can carry that over. There's an intersection. I don't know if this proportion is going to look right. The front of my leg, the hip, actually comes around past 90 there and comes in and then comes down. So I want to think about that. Here's my 90, and it's going to come around a little bit further than that. So I'm going to say about right there. And then the foot, if we can call it a foot, comes forward. And this is just an extrusion, so I can pull that point over and pull this point over and carry that point over to here. Draw vertical. And I have one of my legs. While you guys catch up, and you'll have a little bit of time after we finish our freehand sketches to clean this up, I'm gonna use my ellipse templates and clean up my ellipse. Let's see, that looks like it should be 20. So that's about a 20-degree ellipse. It's going to come around to there. This one should open up a little bit. Let's see if the cord still works. The cord doesn't work. I need to go to a 30. All along the same minor axis. Let's see if this one's still 30. That looks okay as 30. It needs to be a little bit smaller. That still looks okay. Can't tell. I guess that goes all the way up. So there's a little bit of a shadow right there. And this was the 30, so I'm going to do this really small one. Ooh, I can use it. I can actually use it to fix this. Okay, so let's move to the other side. So I've got about this distance right here from kind of this center area, and I want the foreshortened version of that distance to come back here. The other way I could think about that is I just stepped out a little bit from where this came down. So this is gonna be the center of my back ellipse. I already have the width that back ellipse needs to be. I have my minor axis, and so I've got a center line. So I'm just gonna sketch in this. This is getting what? Thinner or white? Thinner or fatter?
Fatter.
Fatter, yeah. All right, we're starting to learn. A little bit fatter. Let me check the cord. Looks maybe could be, I'm gonna go with the fatter portion of this, but yeah, that looks pretty good. Then I need again to estimate this depth. I'm thinking shortened version of that depth. Another ellipse, if anything, err on the side of being a little fatter than that last one. Come straight down off the back. Forward. Hits that toe. Up from the toe. And carry this point over. That's the height of the toe. Then head back. I could really carry that intersection over. So we have a foreshortened little leg back there. He looks a little squatty. I'll give you just a couple of minutes to catch up. There is a small hole, of course, where the leg connects to the hip. I don't know if there's any thickness there. I'm going to draw some. What I want to point out here just really quickly is that the degree of the ellipse that's used for this, if it's in this location, if I have to put like concentric ellipses inside there, the degree won't change. Okay, so I mentioned earlier, we need to draw a hexagon. So real quickly, there's a way to divide an ellipse. What we're going to do is we're going to sketch an ellipse. So just everybody look up for a second, because this is what we need to do. And if I have this line going towards one of my vanishing points, what I can do is I can take this radius right here, I can divide it in half. So that radius right there, and then go towards, this is my vanishing line going the other way, then go towards the other vanishing point, and where it intersects the ellipse, that gives me a third. So to divide that ellipse into 3 pi pieces, that's how I can do it. Take the radius, divide it in half, cut across. It's a rough estimate, but it's pretty close. And then to get a hexagon, so that would just give me a triangle. To get a hexagon, I can just extend these lines out and then connect those intersection points. And it's not dead on perfect, but it's a good estimation. And so we're going to do that. Now, I did mess up on the earlier drawing, and somehow I want this flat edge to be on the front. So let's find where those, I basically have two of these simple hexagonal shapes. It's not exactly hexagonal. And they're basically sitting in the center of either side of these surfaces. So I'm going to find the center there. I'm going to find the center here. And my minor axis for these two ellipses that I'll build my hexagon after, what is the minor axis? I'm trying to build a horizontal ellipse. Nope, it's straight up and down. It's vertical. So I'm going to eye in what an ellipse would be. I've got kind of a square surface to look at to reference, and then I'll check my chord. That's going towards one vanishing point. This is going towards the other. That feels pretty good. Should be essentially almost the exact same ellipse. If anything, it's a little bit closer to the horizon line. Let me check the chord here. That looks okay too. So here's where I'm going to build my hexagon. And I'm going to build my hexagon, this is what I think I remember. I'm going to build my hexagon with this line. I'm going to divide that line in half. Let me zoom in for you. So I put this line, it's going towards the left vanishing point. I'm taking that radius, I'm going to divide it in half, cut through that midpoint, going towards the right vanishing point. Here are my intersections, so I can sketch in that. And I made this a little bit dark on my sheet of paper earlier. I'm going to try and keep it light. But I cut across there, found those intersection points. Whoops, I did not do that right. That should be about right there. And then I'm going to extend those lines to hit the rest of my ellipse, and that gives me, what is a hexagon? And the back part of the hexagon, I'm just going to go very, very light because I don't want to see that. And in all honesty, without doing that entire construction on this ellipse, I'm just going to try and mimic some of these angles and find those intersection points over here. I really only need half of it. I only need to see half of it. So I don't need to build that entire thing. And if we look at the height of these connector pieces, they're pretty stout. So I'm going to come up to about right here, maybe a little bit higher. Since I want this hexagon to taper, I'm going to draw my ellipse just a little bit smaller. I'm going to check the chord. I already had a line kind of coming through the middle.
Jared, when you put your hand up there, the exposure gets really janky.
So now I'm just drawing in some slightly tapered lines that come up and meet that top ellipse. And I'm going to try and translate, again, these angles just up to here, right? So I'm looking at this angle. I found that intersection. I'm going to carry it across. I'm looking at this angle. I'm just going to carry that to there. Looking at this angle, that's almost vertical. It's just a little bit inside. This is going towards the left vanishing point. I've got that. It's not the perfect hexagon. It's not even really that close. But it's close enough for the resolution with which we are drawing. And just to make sure that we see that that's a hole, I'm just going to hatch in a portion of it. How's it coming? It's coming. This is probably one you know, this is tough. So I'm going to repeat that process over here. I'm going to carry that height over to there, sketch in another ellipse that's slightly smaller than the one that was down here. Let me check the chord on that. It looks like I'm not wide enough. This one's like throwing y'all into the fire, right?
Yes.
It's like, hey. I don't know why I see, I guess that's a little further over. Why I've constructed and I see that surface back there. I'm going to tighten mine up while you guys catch up. Pause. When I set this up initially, I had my shirt coming down to here. I'm going to raise it up just to put some separation between what we've drawn so far and what I want to see. Now, if we look at this guy, again, this is about a square proportion by 1/2 coming back, but it's tapered, and it's only tapered from the front. It's not tapered from the side. It's straight up and down from the side. But I want to find what is a square proportion. Again, here's what most people missed on the first go-round this morning, is that square proportion. I'm going to ghost in the remainder of my block so as to help me create the taper. So here's, this is easy, right? Just a rectangular block. Boom. So to taper it in, I'm going to go from this corner, and I'm going to step in my estimate, put a little dot right there. I'm going to look at the foreshortened distance that might be that same estimate on the back, and that gives me an angle. So we got the taper on this back side. Remember, I plotted that point. I can really, since this is so close to vertical, I can basically just draw a parallel line for that to where it meets back there. What this does is it gives me, I can draw an X right here from corner to corner. This center is difficult to see, but we need to draw his neck, right? Now look how thin this ellipse is going to be on this surface. I mean, it's so thin we can't even really use a chord check, but I want to make sure that my proportion is about right. I'll tell you, I think the proportion of these is a little small. This feels a little bit more accurate. And look, I've gone up and hit my horizon line. So there'll be another just super, super thin ellipse right here. And make sure it's centered around my minor axis. But I'll only see the top of this. Excuse me, that edge right there. I won't see the ellipse opening up. And then I'm going to step up a little bit more, and I'll have the exact same ellipse, same width ellipse for the hole, but then I'll have one right around it that would be for what is really the neck. That's a little bit wider. And then another one that's very similar, again, really super thin ellipse right here. And then to get the overall width of his head, I'm going to sketch in another ellipse. I haven't carried my minor axis up. That helps me with the mirroring. But what this does is it gives me almost a profile, so very similar to what you guys were doing with the drinking glasses. His head is going to come out, hit tangent to vertical. I'm going to run out of room again. So, where do we chop his head off? All right, so here's where I'm going to sketch that little infinity looking symbol. So come up and down and then roll it around. If you had room, that's great, finish it. I have no problem if you want to get creative with his head and shirt as long as it's respectful. Okay. Everybody look up here for just a minute. So if you look at our Lego guy, his edges are pretty crisp down here, but when you get to his shirt has a little radius and then it increases right in here, and I want to try and reflect that. And so rather than one line right here, just like we did earlier, I'm going to put just a small fillet down here. I'm going to represent that edge with the beginning and the end of that fillet. And as it approaches the corner, it's going to wrap towards the back. That side is, and this is going to wrap towards the other side, and it'll roll around like this. We won't see much of it on the back side, but we'll see the silhouette of the object will be rounded off. We'll talk more about that next week, kind of these radiused edges. And then it would radius back here, and again the silhouette right back there would be good. We're not going to see too much of that because I'm going to tell you the arms are fairly difficult. So let's look at the arms for a second. I'm not going to draw the arms down like that. We're going to make the arms as easy as possible, and we're going to draw them to where the ellipses for his hands are straight up and down. And so to do that, the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to estimate how far down this is. The arm enters the shoulder right here. So I'm going to come down to this point and step out away from the body just a little bit, basically half the thickness of his arm. And then I'm going to draw a line coming forward, so it's on a right vanishing line, coming forward, and it's about this far in front, and then there's a little ellipse right here. I'm going to check the minor axis. That one's too thin. This is his cuff. Gets a little wider as it goes back, so it's not going to be parallel with that. It's going to be opening up a little bit. That goes back to there. Now I'm not going to get too deep into this, but as opposed to a minor axis right here for how the shoulder meets the body, it's basically a round, right? That minor axis is at a slight angle because of the angle that we put on the side of the body, because of that taper. And so I'm going to drop in an ellipse right here. I'll be honest with you, I have no idea how to check that. I'm going to have to figure it out. But this should open up. His shoulder should come out just a little bit. And you can almost put a sphere out here to get to that thickness. That might be a big old sphere. I'm not sure. This ellipse still needs to be a little bit wider, a little bit more open, a little bit fatter. There'll be another one to the inside of that where the hand comes in. Again, it's going to be the same degree. The hand will step out. I'm gonna put a point where I think the center of the hand, the very center, like the core of the hand, would be, and that becomes I can put a vertical in to start my ellipses that should be thinner than this ellipse, but wider than this ellipse. And the height of my hand, I'm going to estimate to be something like this. The hands are pretty big. Now let me check those with a cord if I can. They're getting pretty thin. That looks okay. If anything, this just needs to be a little bit wider. And a little bit wider. I'm going to close off the cylinder, but very lightly, because the hand has like a curl on the bottom. It's a cylinder, but then it's cut from the side, basically. It's got that curl on the bottom and then a smaller radius on the top. So let's... let's work that out. I'm gonna say it's somewhere about right here going down. So it's somewhat straight to begin with, and then it's cut like so. Carry that point to the other side. We'll basically do the same thing. I'll see the thickness. And there would be an offset ellipse. I need this to curl more. That doesn't look right. It's actually rolling around to the front right here. And then to begin to build that hand on the other side, well, I'll give you just a minute. Let's mirror the arm. So remember, the first thing that I did with the arm is I basically found a point on this surface of his shirt that was down where I thought his elbow might be, and I brought it away from his shirt. That became essentially kind of the bone that came forward. So I want to do the same thing on the other side. So I'm going to find that point on the other side, and then I'm going to step out a little bit from that, and that gives me this point, the mirror. And again, I'm estimating this. If you really wanted to, you could use the Y method and some of the mirror methods that we've talked about and find that point. My guess, let's come back. I need to make sure that's converging right. And then I can find this point, right? So this line and this line are that bone. Then I'm going to carry this back towards the right vanishing point, left vanishing point over here, to get that point right there. That becomes, here's my minor axis for the cuff ellipse. Should this ellipse be thinner or fatter than the other one?
Fatter.
Do you think that was a trick question?
Yes.
It's going to be a little thinner. It's not as close. But I've drawn it too thin. Let's see. Let me check my cord. I've drawn it a little too thin. Put in another ellipse inside there. I'm going to mimic this angle coming back. It looks like his arm's too far out. Why is that? Why is that? There's something wrong. Well, maybe. I guess this would come out. His shoulder's going to come out. I'm struggling with the arms. I'm going to cheat. I'm just going to move it in. All right, so my hand, again, I'm going to carry this point over along this line now. So the center of my hand is going to be there. Let me put the minor axis. Let me carry over the top and the bottom ellipse centers for the hand. They're about right there and right there. This one's going to be a little bit thinner than that one, which these were already pretty thin. Here's the bottom. They should be a little bit, the hands overall should be a little bit smaller because of foreshortening. And then I need to draw in the opening of the hand, which is cutting through that ellipse like so. And I won't see, what I realized is I won't see as much of the curve in the hand down here because I'm almost looking at it. So something happened, this hand is extended a little too far and I can't figure out what it is right now. I'll have to take a look later. But ultimately there's our construction. So Shay's gonna come in here and do a pencil drawing with you. Of a vacuum. I'm gonna go do some grading, but the only thing left here is to just try and clean up your line work. You know, if you want to finish that before the end of the day, that's then you won't need to redo it. If you really want to get a good grade on this, my guess is most of you will want to give it a second try, if you haven't already. So, you know, just like with that last drawing, I'm going to go ahead and help the reader's eye out with and add some just a little bit of hatching and shading to the right facing surfaces. So just right here. Again, this, yeah.
I was just gonna ask, like, I know you said whenever it meets like the ground, you're supposed to use the third line weight.
Uh-huh.
Do you use it whenever like something meets something else, like whenever the arm meets the shoulder?
No, that would be a good 2. So I'm going to hatch this surface, and hopefully you'll just notice how much easier it is for our eye. I'm going to hatch the underside of this little guy right here. I'm going to hatch this as it rolls around. I'm going to hatch this as it rolls around. Hatch this surface. I could hatch the outside of this as it rolls kind of around, gradient. Same thing here. The inside as it rolls around this way. Inside as it rolls around that way. Maybe hatch the underside of the arm over here, maybe even right here. Put a little hatch on the neck as it's rolling around. Put a little hatch right here. Oh, one last thing. Let's give him a little face. So we've talked about, you know, contour lines. I'm going to use the contour line this time. Carry myself back here. This is the front edge of, that's the very front quadrant of that cylinder. Then this is a little bit wider, and then I'm going to roll that around and come up, and what that's telling me is that this is the front of that face, similar to the curved surfaces you were working on this morning. And so now I'm going to look at this guy. The mouth is really close to the bottom. I should see more of this part of the smile. Should come through tangent, and then this side would be a little bit accelerated, right? And then his eyes are basically circles, which this one will look a lot like a circle because it's almost facing us. But then as I roll around, this one will look more like an ellipse. And let me give him, I'm gonna give that just a little bit of thickness. Why are y'all laughing at my face? Yay! All right.